Hi there, and welcome to the Celeb Tea. You might want to sit down for this one, because what's unfolding is nothing short of explosive. Word around political and social circles is that the federal government may be using the recent controversy surrounding Charlie Kirk to reshape public memory, potentially sidelining George Floyd's legacy in the process. Here's the situation. The U.S. Senate has just declared that October 14th will now be recognized as the official National Day of Remembrance for Charlie Kirk. On the surface, it might seem like a harmless tribute, but there's a huge twist. October 14th also happens to be George Floyd's birthday. For years, many in the Black community have marked that date as a time of remembrance and reflection, honoring Floyd's life and the powerful role his death played in amplifying the Black Lives Matter movement. Naturally, this decision has sparked outrage. People aren't just whispering their frustrations, they're speaking loudly. Prominent Black voices, including celebrities like Dame Dash, are publicly criticizing the move. According to sources, Dame Dash even believes this entire decision has Donald Trump's fingerprints all over it. To fully grasp why this is such a flashpoint, let's break down the backstory. Charlie Kirk's death has dominated headlines in recent weeks, but the details surrounding it are messy, to say the least. Almost immediately after he was shot, the FBI released an image of a supposed person of interest. That suspect's own father later turned him in, and officials identified him as Tyler Robinson. Utah Governor Spencer Cox then claimed that screenshots existed showing Robinson allegedly admitting guilt on the social platform Discord. But before the narrative could solidify, Discord themselves issued a statement denying that any such evidence existed on their platform. Instead of clarity, the contradiction only fueled suspicions that authorities weren't being completely transparent. That alone was strange enough, but what happened next added even more fuel to the fire. When Charlie Kirk's body was returned to his hometown, it was flown aboard Air Force Two. Yes, the same aircraft typically reserved for official government use. Even more surprising, Vice President J.D. Vance was personally involved, reportedly helping to carry Kirk's casket. This move struck many as excessive. While Kirk had a large following as a conservative commentator, he never held elected office, nor served in the military. Yet his farewell resembled something closer to an official state or military funeral. Even sports teams got involved. The Dallas Cowboys, for example, held a public tribute to him before a game. But not everyone was on board with this treatment. In fact, some military personnel who dared to post online criticizing the spectacle found themselves suspended. Reports indicate that dozens of service members are currently under review for social media activity as the military scrambles to comply with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's directive to punish anyone who appeared to celebrate Kirk's death. For critics, this only reinforced the perception that the government was actively trying to transform Kirk into a martyr. The irony, of course, is that Kirk was a deeply polarizing figure while alive. He frequently made headlines for controversial positions on slavery, abortion, and gun ownership, sparking heated debates across the political spectrum. Because of that history, many are questioning whether elevating him to near-heroic status is truly appropriate. Still, the government has doubled down. The Senate went beyond symbolic gestures by formally passing a resolution to name October 14th as the National Day of Remembrance for Charlie Kirk. Supporters argue it's the perfect way to honor someone they claim championed American values. But opponents, particularly within the Black community, see something much darker at play. The problem is simple yet powerful. October 14th is also George Floyd's birthday. Since his tragic death in 2020, that date has organically become a day of remembrance for many, particularly in communities of color, as a way to reflect on the broader struggle against racial injustice. To now superimpose Kirk's name onto that date feels, to many, like an attempt to overwrite history. Critics argue this wasn't some coincidental overlap, but rather a calculated move. Floyd's death ignited a global protest movement that reshaped conversations on policing, race, and inequality. By aligning Kirk's remembrance with the same date, detractors believe the government is attempting to dilute Floyd's impact, gradually pushing his legacy out of the public consciousness. After all, as the old saying goes, those who control the narrative often control the future. And from this perspective, it looks like an intentional effort to rewrite that narrative. What makes this moment especially tense is the growing belief that the move is about more than honoring Kirk. It's about diminishing Floyd. Within the Black community, the whispers have become louder. This is not simply coincidence, but strategy. By promoting a figure who largely appealed to a white conservative base on the very day many remember George Floyd, critics argue that lawmakers are attempting to steer the national conversation away from racial justice and back toward traditional conservative values. And it's not just activists or everyday citizens who feel this way. According to inside sources, even celebrities and public figures are privately frustrated. Still, most of them are hesitant to speak out, fearing backlash from sponsors, record labels, or corporate partners who might view public criticism as too risky. In today's cultural climate, staying silent often feels safer than jeopardizing one's livelihood. One person who isn't afraid to raise his voice, however, is Dame Dash. Known for his outspoken nature, Dame has reportedly decided he has little left to lose. Over the years, he's faced bankruptcy and legal disputes, and even had his one-third ownership of Rockefeller Records stripped away by the state of New York. With so many personal and professional setbacks already behind him, Dame is uniquely positioned to call out what he sees as a blatant attempt to erase Floyd's influence. From his perspective, this isn't just about a Senate resolution or a symbolic date on the calendar. It's about power and control over history itself. Dame Dash has openly stated that he believes the majority white political establishment is actively working to erase George Floyd from the narrative. According to him, the ripple effect of Floyd's death, those massive protests, the global conversations on systemic racism, the calls for reform, represents a shift that many in power would prefer to undo. More controversially, Dame has gone so far as to accuse former President Donald Trump of being the driving force behind this push. Sources suggest Dame claims that while Trump may have publicly shown moments of empathy in the wake of Floyd's death, privately he was deeply unsettled by the riots, protests, and criticism that unfolded during his administration. In Dame's telling, Trump has long wanted to erase that chapter of history, and when the chance arose to elevate Charlie Kirk's name, he quietly encouraged conservative senators to seize the opportunity. If true, that allegation underscores just how calculated this move may have been. It wouldn't simply be about honoring Kirk, it would be about rewriting history to minimize Floyd's role and reframe the national conversation in a way that benefits conservative politics. Meanwhile, ordinary people are left grappling with the contradictions. Social media has been flooded with commentary pointing out the hypocrisy of the government's actions. On one hand, officials are praising Kirk as a champion of free speech and American values. On the other, they're actively punishing military members for expressing personal opinions online, even when those opinions amount to little more than questioning whether Kirk deserved such a grand send-off. Critics have been quick to highlight that while people are losing jobs over comments about Kirk, there was little accountability when tasteless jokes and rhetoric about George Floyd circulated online in the wake of his death. This disparity fuels a growing sense of anger. To many, it seems as though the government is bending over backward to sanctify Kirk while simultaneously diminishing or dismissing the humanity of Floyd. The optics of that dynamic are hard to ignore, especially for communities that already feel marginalized. The backlash has also been deeply personal. Some have declared outright that they refuse to mourn Charlie Kirk, pointing out that Kirk himself never showed empathy toward Floyd while alive. For those individuals, extending respect in death to someone who denied it in life feels impossible. The sentiment is raw, emotional, and deeply divisive, but it captures just how much this decision has struck a nerve. At the heart of it all lies a bigger question. Is this an intentional erasure of George Floyd's legacy, or is it simply a misguided attempt to honor Charlie Kirk? Supporters of the resolution insist it's the latter, framing Kirk as someone who boldly defended the values he believed in. But detractors argue that the overlap of dates is too significant to ignore, especially when the government could have chosen literally any other day to honor him. Beyond the politics, this controversy raises troubling questions about memory, power, and history itself. Who gets remembered and who gets erased? How do symbolic gestures like naming a Remembrance Day shape the way future generations understand the past?